Okay, so today we're going way back in time.
Uh,
We're looking at this incredible, like this little piece of history. It's
yeah.
called Defend Yourself by Jack Grover.
Wow.
And it's got a foreword by C. E. McBride.
Okay.
And what makes this even more special is this was a gift to Bernie and Mrs. Humes back in 1958.
Wow, that's amazing.
It is. It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
So this is a book that's been around the block a little bit. And
Yeah.
what we're going to do today is we're going to try to not just look at the book, with rose-colored glasses because it is old, but we're actually going to really try to extract like the core self-defense strategies,
Yeah.
the historical context, and really try to see are there any practical insights that we could still use today?
Absolutely. And I think that's what's so fascinating about these sorts of like historical martial arts manuals or self-defense books is that like I feel like self-defense had like a different kind of presence like in the public consciousness back then.
Yeah.
And this probably filled a very real need for a lot of people. And it's interesting to look at it through that lens. Like what were the concerns
Right.
and the approaches at that time?
Yeah. So to set the stage here, the book starts off by kind of like outlining some of the, sort of like the foundational self-defense systems of the world, as it were.
Yeah.
And the first one that it brings up is judo. And it traces this all the way back to, Lama monks in China.
Wow.
And it really highlights its use of anatomical knowledge.
Okay.
And it uses that, both for strikes and holds.
Right.
And then it mentions that Dr. Jigoro Kano, later consolidated all these techniques into judo as we know it
Right.
in the 19th century.
I mean, what's fascinating about this to me is just that, like, even in the late 1950s,
Yeah.
there is like a recognition of judo's like pretty deep roots.
Yeah.
By this point, judo have gained considerable international recognition, I think. So it makes sense that it would be like presented as like a significant system.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like what's really key to judo and what makes it so effective is its emphasis on kuzushi, so breaking the opponent's balance.
Okay.
And that often leverages points of anatomical weakness and things like that.
Okay.
And so it really allows like a smaller person to overcome, a larger, stronger person potentially, even without like specific training.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
The book also mentions amachaku.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of that?
That's not.
So this is a fighting style of the Incas in the central Andes of South America.
Wow. Yeah.
And this was developed over 7 centuries ago.
Okay.
So, I mean, it really is kind of like a powerful reminder that like the need for self-preservation has really spurred the development of all these combat arts across the globe.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And it really kind of underscores that human impulse to defend oneself.
Right.
Has manifested in so many different ways and been shaped by like all these different cultures and environments.
Yeah.
So yeah, including amachaku alongside judo, it really kind of broadens that understanding.
Right.
Amachaku itself, from what I understand, is an ancient combat art emphasizing close quarters techniques.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, it's amazing to think about.
Yeah, so then it goes on to kind of like name drop, a bunch of other systems.
Okay.
So we've got karate, Hindu, Varmini, Greek, pancratium.
What?
It doesn't really go into detail on any of them, but then it makes this really insightful point, and I think this is something that's really worth like hanging on to.
Yeah.
It says that like the most effective approach is really to have command of the parts of all these systems that are applicable to like the job at hand.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I love that.
And he even uses this great analogy. It says like, a boxer might be beaten by a skilled wrestler in a small room.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So it's like you got to kind of like adjust your skills.
Yeah. And that's like a remarkably, like, I think forward-thinking perspective even for today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like in modern martial arts, cross-training is like hugely valuable.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, this idea that like no single style holds all the answers.
Right.
And that adaptability is crucial is like a really timeless principle.
Absolutely.
And I think about it, if you have like someone who knows how to strike like a boxer
Yeah.
and how to grapple like a judo practitioner,
Right.
they have a much more versatile skill set than someone who's just like a really good puncher,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's something to consider even based on this book's like overview of these systems.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, if I'm interested in self-defense, maybe I should consider how do I combine striking and grappling in a way that gives me like a more well-rounded approach.
Absolutely. So next it delves into some diverse fighting styles.
Okay.
And the first one that it brings up is Thai boxing.
Uh-huh.
And it calls it the roughest organized sport.
Wow.
where strikes with any part of the body are permitted.
Yep.
And get this, old-time fighters even dip their arms in tar and glass.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it just like paints such a visceral picture
Right.
of like, the historical brutality of some of these fighting forms.
Yeah.
And it's such a contrast to like the more regulated nature of modern combat sports.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, you can really see how like societal views on acceptable violence
Yeah.
and the pursuit of like more ethical forms of competition have really shaped how these sports have evolved.
For sure. For sure. Okay, so following that up, we've got Savate and the Boxe Française.
Okay.
And this is a foot-based fighting system from France.
Okay.
And the book notes that Charles Lecour combined English boxing with foot fighting around 1850, and it just gained huge popularity.
Why?
So it's really fascinating to see this kind of like cross-pollination of fighting traditions.
Yeah, it really shows how like techniques and ideas, travel and evolve over time.
Yeah.
And they're influenced by different cultural needs and innovations and things like that.
Right.
But yeah, the integration of kicking into like a primarily hand-based system like English boxing is a pretty significant development.
Yeah.
And it really kind of, offers like a different range and a different set of tactics and things like that.
Absolutely. Okay, so of course it mentions wrestling and boxing as like, more familiar forms.
Right.
But it really quickly pivots to what it deems essential for self-defense, and that is knowledge of anatomy.
Okay.
And it presents this in something called body charts.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a cornerstone of like many effective self-defense systems.
Yeah.
It's, understanding where the body is vulnerable allows you to focus your efforts for maximum impact, even if you're not like physically imposing.
Right.
It's about efficiency. It's about using like knowledge as leverage.
Right. Okay, so on the front view chart, it highlights like pressure points, like the base of the nose pressure, hollows on the cheekbones, the knockout spot on the jawbone, the jugular vein, and the solar plexus.
Yeah, I mean, all of those are, pretty well-known targets.
Yeah. And each of them has like a specific physiological basis for why it's vulnerable.
Right.
Like a sharp upward strike to the base of the nose
Yeah.
can cause like extreme pain
Yeah,
and temporarily disrupt vision.
of course.
Pressure on the cheekbones can actually like affect balance and cause significant discomfort.
Right.
The angle of the jawbone makes it really susceptible to causing a knockout blow because of its proximity to certain nerves.
Yeah.
The jugular vein, when compressed, obviously, restricts blood flow to the brain.
Yeah.
And a strike to the solar plexus can temporarily knock the wind out of someone.
Right. Okay, then we go to the back view.
Okay.
And this one includes the vital spot at the second vertebra at the base of the skull.
Oh.
And then various nerves, specifically nerves that are connected to motor functions in the arms and legs.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, really targeting these areas can provide a significant advantage.
Yeah, the back of the head and neck region is just like particularly sensitive.
Right. Because there's so many like vital structures concentrated there.
Yeah.
A sharp impact to the base of the skull can obviously have really severe consequences.
Right.
Similarly, like applying pressure to certain nerves can cause temporary paralysis or loss of function in the limbs.
Wow.
And so, yeah, that can give you a window of opportunity to either escape or to follow up with another attack.
Right. Okay, so moving into chapter 3, this is all about defensive strategies.
Okay.
And the book lays down 4 fundamental rules.
Okay.
Keep cool, know what to do, be able to do it well, and then do it.
Nice. I like that.
Yeah, it's pretty action oriented.
Yeah, and it's very like pragmatic.
Yeah.
The emphasis on staying calm under pressure is absolutely critical.
Right.
Fear can cloud judgment and lead to ineffective actions.
Right.
And the subsequent rules kind of like build on that.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, knowledge and skill are essential,
Yeah.
but they're useless if you can't actually execute them when it matters most.
Right.
I think about like even like simple mindfulness techniques
Yeah.
could help someone manage that fear in a stressful situation.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the book stresses that both defensive and offensive actions are entirely dependent on the specific situation.
Right.
You got to kind of like, use your strengths and exploit your opponent's weaknesses.
Yeah.
And it specifically points out that skill and speed are crucial assets for individuals who might be smaller or weaker.
Right.
Which makes perfect sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, relying on technique over brute force can really level the playing field.
Absolutely.
And that aligns with like, the core principles of many martial arts that, prioritize technique, leverage speed and precision over just like raw power.
Right.
And these attributes can really effectively neutralize a larger, stronger opponent by focusing on efficiency of movement and targeting those vulnerable areas.
So true. Okay, so the book then outlines two common scenarios,
Okay.
and that is being about to be struck or finding yourself in someone's grasp. And for avoiding a strike, it advises against retreating in a straight line.
Right.
Instead, it suggests envisioning a triangle and stepping back along one of its sides.
Interesting.
It's a really clever way to create distance and potentially disrupt their attack.
Yeah, that triangular footwork is a fundamental concept in a lot of combat systems.
Okay.
And it allows you to move laterally, you get off the direct line of attack, and create like advantageous angles for your own response.
Right.
Have you ever thought about how like, even in just like everyday life, like subtly shifting your position
Yeah.
can change like your interaction with someone?
It's a really good point.
Yeah.
Okay, so then it goes on and it has this section called 3 Methods of Starting a Fight.
Okay.
And I mean, this is quite direct.
Yeah.
So the first one is to turn slightly to your right.
Okay.
The second one, and this one sounds pretty forceful, is to whip the outside edge of your right hand down and into the front of your throat. And the third one is to deliver the first blow with the side of your open hand to the spot just below the nose.
Okay, so these are all like initiating actions.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, these are certainly intended to be immediately incapacitating.
Yeah.
The throat strike in particular is a very dangerous technique.
Right.
And it really highlights the potential lethality of self-defense in these extreme situations.
Yeah.
The open hand strike below the nose could also like disrupt breathing and vision.
Right.
And potentially give you a crucial moment to either follow up or escape.
Right.
But it is important to understand that like the book presents these as methods of starting a fight.
Right.
So that implies a context where you believe that an attack is imminent and unavoidable.
Okay, so then we go into chapter 4, and this is all about the attack.
Okay.
And the book emphasizes that a well-executed offense can really be the key to ending a fight.
Right.
It even says that if your opponent is armed or significantly larger, you should use any suitable object as a weapon, which is, pretty practical advice.
Yeah, in situations where you face like a serious threat, especially if the other person have a weapon or a significant size advantage, the primary goal becomes survival.
Yeah.
And utilizing any available tool to equalize that situation is a logical measure, even though it's last resort.
Right.
This really underscores like the importance of situational awareness,
Yeah.
being able to quickly identify potential objects that could be used for defense if necessary.
Yeah. Okay, so then it details 4 main action sequences designed to like end a fight quickly.
Okay.
It advises you to practice them until they become second nature.
Right.
Now, sequence no dot 1, it says it's primarily for opponents who can be harmed by a fist blow and aren't much taller than you.
Okay.
It doesn't really detail the specifics here, but I imagine it probably involves, rapid series of strikes to vulnerable points that we talked about earlier.
Makes sense.
Sequence no dot 3, it says, is used to advantage if you don't run too much danger in coming within reach of your opponent. So, I mean, it kind of like categorizes these based on like perceived threat and opponent characteristics.
Yeah, I mean, this like structured approach to offensive maneuvers really reflects like a tactical mindset.
Yeah.
By considering the potential vulnerabilities and limitations of different opponents.
Yeah.
The book aims to provide like a framework for effective responses.
Yeah.
The emphasis on repetition, to make these sequences automatic is crucial for like execution under the intense stress of a real confrontation.
For sure. For sure. Okay, so chapter 5 is about advanced holds.
Okay.
And the main one that it talks about is the neck hold.
Okay.
And it says that this hold can cause damage to the neck or lead to unconsciousness by applying pressure to the jugular veins.
Right. Yeah, I mean, neck holds are very effective at quickly incapacitating an opponent.
Right.
By restricting blood flow to the brain.
Yeah.
But they also carry like a significant risk of serious injury if they're not executed with precision and control.
Right.
And so I think like modern self-defense training often emphasizes like safer, more control-oriented techniques that achieve a similar outcome with less risk of lasting harm.
Right. Okay, so then we move into weapon defense, chapter 6.
Okay.
And here's where it starts getting really specific.
All right.
So for disarming a gunman who commands hands up, the book recommends a swift downward and a cross sweep with your right hand to seize the gun while simultaneously turning your body sideways.
Wow.
To minimize the target.
Okay.
Followed immediately by a knee strike to the groin.
Okay, yeah. I mean, disarming someone who has a gun is incredibly dangerous.
Right.
And should only be considered as an absolute last resort.
Yeah.
The technique described requires split-second timing,
Right.
accuracy, and a significant element of risk.
Right.
The knee to the groin is a common self-defense tactic,
Yeah.
aimed at creating like temporary distraction or incapacitation,
Yeah.
which could then allow for escape.
Right. Okay. So defense against a nice attack. This one, the book advises immediate retreat to create distance.
Okay.
Pick up an object to throw as a diversion.
Okay.
And then closing the distance to deliver a forceful kick to the groin.
Okay, so again, the groin is highlighted as like a highly vulnerable target.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, when facing a knife, creating distance is paramount.
Yeah.
A knife obviously gives the attacker a significant reach advantage.
Right.
Throwing an object can disrupt their focus,
Yeah.
potentially create an opportunity to either escape or, as the book suggests,
Yeah.
launch a counterattack.
Right.
A strong kick to a vulnerable area like the groin, can help you gain control of the situation.
For sure. Okay, so then we get to chapter 7, self-defense for women.
Okay.
And it starts off by asserting the equal right of women to possess self-defense knowledge.
Of course.
It stresses that defensive responses should vary in intensity,
Yeah.
depending on the situation.
Right.
Ranging from like mild reactions to extreme measures. One piece of advice that kind of like stood out here is that it says, if an unwanted kiss is descending willy-nilly, simply turn your head.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that particular piece of advice definitely reflects the social norms prevalent in 1958.
Yeah.
While, like, de-escalation and setting boundaries are important,
Yeah. Yeah.
more assertive responses are often necessary
Right.
in situations involving unwanted physical contact.
Yeah.
But I think, the chapter's fundamental point about the importance of self-defense knowledge for women was a significant and progressive stance for that era.
Right.
It acknowledged the need for women to be empowered to protect themselves.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so then we move into exercises for self-defense, chapter 8.
Okay.
And this one, it highlights the role of exercise in building strength, stamina, fitness, and muscle mass.
Right.
It recommends a daily workout of approximately 20 minutes,
Okay.
engaging all the major muscle groups.
Yeah.
One specific exercise it mentions is a stomach exercise, where you stand straight. Extend your arms overhead and bend backward at the hips.
Gotcha.
The book also touches on correcting sway back posture
Okay.
through like proper standing technique and keeping your back and shoulders straight.
Yeah. I mean, physical fitness is definitely a crucial component of effective self-defense.
Yay.
Strength and stamina, can improve your ability to execute techniques,
Yay.
endure physical altercation, and potentially escape.
Yeah.
The specific exercises mentioned, reflect common fitness practices of the time.
Yeah.
The focus on posture also aligns with principles of body mechanics that can contribute to both power generation and injury prevention.
Yeah. Okay, so then we get to chapter 9, and this is kind of a curveball.
Oh?
It's called 4 Knots to Know,
Wow, okay.
and it talks about the double half hitch, which is recommended for keeping a line taut,
Uh-huh.
the granny knot,
Okay.
which it suggests for tying packages or even restraining someone.
Interesting.
The square or reef knot.
Yeah.
This is for joining two ends of a single line.
Mm-hmm.
And then the bow line
Okay.
for creating a non-slipping loop at the end of a line.
Gotcha.
So it's quite interesting to see these like practical, almost survivalist skills
Right.
included in this self-defense manual.
Yeah, the inclusion of these knots suggests like a broader understanding of like self-reliance and preparedness
Right.
in emergency situations.
Yeah.
Knowing how to tie basic knots could be really invaluable for securing equipment,
Right.
creating makeshift restraints,
Right.
or even just for general preparedness.
Right.
The specific mention of the granny knot for restraining someone
Yeah.
while perhaps reflecting the era,
Yeah.
does highlight a practical consideration beyond just like physical combat.
Yeah. Okay, so then we move into chapter X, self-defense first aid.
Okay.
And this one, it emphasizes staying calm,
Right.
assessing the situation,
Mm-hmm.
administering necessary first aid, but always seeking professional medical attention for anything beyond minor injuries.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Right.
So it gives instructions on how to control severe bleeding using a tourniquet,
Yeah.
how to manage unconsciousness by
Okay.
laying the person flat, loosening clothing, and using a stimulant.
Yeah.
And then it also covers how to handle suspected broken bones by seeking medical help, controlling bleeding, and keeping the injured person comfortable.
Yeah.
The chapter even describes the back pressure arm lift method for artificial respiration.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And it lists the essential items for a first aid kit as tincture of merthiolate, sterile gauze, waterproof tape, and aromatic ammonia.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, this chapter underscores that, like, self-defense isn't just about, like, the confrontation itself,
Right.
but also about managing the aftermath,
Yeah.
whether you or someone else has sustained injuries.
Yeah.
The recommended first aid supplies, definitely reflect what was commonly available and considered effective in 1958.
Right.
Medical knowledge and first aid practices have certainly evolved since then,
Right.
but the core principles of controlling bleeding, maintaining breathing, and seeking professional help
Yeah.
remain essential.
Absolutely. Okay, so then we get to chapter 11, Tricks of the Trade.
Okay.
And this one, it offers some more unconventional pieces of advice. So the first one is about killing fear.
Right.
And it mentions that certain West Pacific warriors
Uh-huh.
developed methods to overcome fear before battle.
Okay.
Another one is to throw pepper into an attacker's eyes for temporary blindness.
Okay.
I mean, this is like a precursor to pepper spray.
Right.
And for dealing with a dog attack, it suggests using a hat or a magazine to redirect the dog's attention.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, these are more like improvised tactics
Yeah.
that rely on quick thinking and exploiting an attacker's vulnerabilities or instincts.
Right.
The idea of mental preparation to manage fear
Yeah.
is a powerful concept in any high-stress situation.
Absolutely.
Even if, like, the specific techniques of those West Pacific warriors aren't detailed.
Yeah.
Um, Using pepper as a temporary incapacitant is logical,
Yeah. Yeah.
even though it might have been less readily available back then.
Right.
And using an object to deflect a dog's attack is a sensible way to protect yourself while creating an opportunity to escape.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, so then finally, chapter 12, it has a combat summary.
Okay.
And it strongly encourages readers to diligently study and practice all the material until it becomes instinctive and to review it regularly.
Sure.
And it specifically lists the 24 vital points from those body charts, the 4 knots,
Yeah.
and the procedures for handling bleeding unconsciousness, broken bones, and administering artificial respiration as key areas to master.
Yeah, the emphasis on consistent practice and regular review reinforces the idea that self-defense isn't just about acquiring theoretical knowledge.
Right.
It's about developing practical skills that can be reliably executed under pressure. And just like any other skill, self-defense requires ongoing training to maintain proficiency.
So true. So true. Okay, so as we conclude our deep dive into Defend Yourself, what are some of the most significant takeaways for you?
I think a few things stand out to me.
Yeah.
One is just this foundational emphasis on understanding anatomy as a basis for effective self-defense.
Right, right.
That's a recurring and important theme.
Okay.
Another is just the direct and often quite forceful nature of the recommended techniques.
Right.
And that really reflects a time when maybe personal safety concerns were more immediate for many.
Yeah.
And then thirdly, the inclusion of not just fighting techniques, but also practical skills like first aid and knot tying.
Yeah.
Paints a picture of a very comprehensive approach to self-reliance and preparedness.
Yeah. It's a fascinating glimpse into the mindset of self-defense in 1958.
It really is.
Yeah. And the author makes it very clear that, some knowledge of self-defense is always better than none. Right. And that often awareness and smart strategy can be more effective than relying solely on physical strength.
Sure.
And it really makes you kind of think about that tension between preparation and the unpredictable nature of real-world confrontations.
Right.
It really leaves you pondering, in the face of the unknown, how do you best prepare yourself?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's a single answer to that.
Right.
But it's definitely something worth considering.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
This is great.
Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yep.
All right, we'll see you next time.
Awesome.
Bye.